Alrighty, everyone. Welcome to another patch notes video. So for those you don't know, we have two patches to go over. So I'm not going to re-go over any abilities that came up before unless they are really prevalent and I really have to do that. So if you need any information about abilities that have already been released, I would go watch the last video. Also, a lot of S-tier abilities from this patch will get their own separate videos about how you can optimize and use those abilities to the best of their ability. Kek W. So let's start with patch 2.11 and let's try to run through this. Command. Basically, the changes to command is now it is at the end of a creature's turn instead of during a turn. This means that you don't get to steal their action and make them do something. So it's just really, it's a good nerf because now you're not stealing action economy. It's still a good ability, right? You still like pseudo swing the tempo, but it's not +3, it's now +1, which is good. It's just not as broken as it used to be. So we'll knock it down to A tier for now. Next, shock. So what happens to shock is now you can't get chain stunned after you get stunned once. That's it. You can't be stunned by the feature again. But that's fine. The main reason why that's fine is because you'll be doing so much damage with shock anyway, because not only was it a stun, but it's also 2d10. So 2d10 on top of you having advantage on attacks against a stun target. Sometimes you're just critting them and they're going to die regardless. So if you're focusing down your target properly, then you should be killing your target in 2 turns with shock anyway. So it doesn't super matter unless your opponents are getting picked up, which is why shock is going to remain an S tier, and it's probably going to be like bottom of S tier. It's still a really good ability. Time Winder, even though it says here changes with Time Winder is actually completely changed to just time skip, where you skip a creature's turn. Obviously, that's a major nerf because what Time Winder used to be, they used to have fast forward, which was just part of Time Winder, and that's all that time skip is. But that was the best part of Time Winder. So the fact that they lost it hits their options, but it's still pretty good. Again, it's one of those just drop down into A tier. Pretty good. Lucky Bag. Oh man, I'm not going through each of them in tier list. Next, we have some buffs in this patch. We have buffs to Consume, which now Consume can be used a lot more frequently. It locks them out of their ability for a good amount of time, and after you cancel out their ability, they have a debuff, so they have disadvantage on attack rolls and those ability checks. Consume is now a debuff spell. Consume is actually really good now because you're debuffing an opponent, you're locking them out of their ability, and you're getting a lot of temporary hit points. It's just, Consume is just really, really, really good, where it's to the point where I probably want to throw it in S tier just for its ability to lock out an opponent and to give you, let's say, give you those 7 temp hit points, those 10 temporary hit points. And the math behind being able to not lock someone, to like give them disadvantage on saving throws in particular is really powerful, because you give them disadvantage on saving throws and then they fall victim to hold person if the Consume user is a spellcaster, and then once they do that, now they're getting paralyzed, now they're getting crit, and it's like a real big snowball effect, which is really, really, really good. The only thing quote unquote holding Consume back is the fact that it's not AoE shutdown like a lot of S tier abilities are, but it's so good. I'm going to leave it at the top of A tier for now, and maybe it can push up higher into S tier, maybe with changes to other abilities. We have Investor. Investor, it just changes exactly. Investor, it's technically a better ability because you need less gold to do what you were doing before, but it still has the exact same problems. Not really any change here. I think it still remains as a nice solid C tier ability. You know, just to add on, patch 2.0 was an amazing patch. We are probably never going to get another patch like that, because in that patch, every ability is probably usable in some meaningful way. With that being said, Quick Stir, one of those abilities that's just like, yeah, it gives you 2 attacks if you're a martial. That's sometimes it's just good enough. That's, you get 2 attacks for your bonus action. That's good value. Now it also has some extra quality of life. So now your short rests are faster, your long rests are faster, and your time-based features are also faster. Quickstir is already B tier. I don't think these changes are going to move it out of B tier, but Quickstir is still just a solid ability. Now you're getting just a little more on top of those 2 more attacks, which is always a good thing. Reflect got completely reworked. You cloak yourself in energy, protects against powerful might. When you take damage as a reaction, you cloak yourself until the next turn. You'll have damage taken and force damage, and only take half damage. It's okay. Again, it's still worse than the basic options a spellcaster has, because you know what's better than this? Taking no damage by using shield, or just making their rolls into a nat 1 with silvery barbs. These are all first level spells. This just feels like a defensive level spell, so it's gonna Reflect is probably gonna stay in C tier even after the changes. It's pretty good though. Teleport. Display space at will. Once per turn, you can use your free action to displace yourself or any visible area and bring a creature object closer to you. This is actually pretty good because you can move creatures into suitable AoE spots to allow your casters and other abilities to shine on your team. It's actually enough utility to actually bring it on par with abilities like Reflect and Drop and stuff. It's stuff that like I'd expect to be in a low tier spell, which is why it's in C tier. That's what this tier. It's low tier spell. Perks. When you receive damage, increase your the changes to perks. When you receive damage, increase your accuracy count by 1 up to 10. Expand to increase the natural roll by 3. This change is broken. Usually, what perks is you go into combat fully stacked. You go something, boom, you crit it, boom, that was your ability, and that was okay. You crit the thing, you do good, you move on. And then in combat, it hits you. It probably wasn't the A tier that I put it in, but it was still pretty good. This, on the other hand, Perks is now every turn. Perks is one of those abilities, spoiler alert, that will get its own video dedicated to it. But Perks is one of those abilities where you should be going into it fully stacked with 10, and every turn you're just using it to increase the natural roll. So let's say you have like a +8 to hit. That's like your average. Let's say you have +5 strength, +3 proficiency, so you have +8 to hit. Let's say you roll a 9 on a die, that's 9. Maybe you just add 3 to that, and now you have a 12, and that hits a lot of spellcasters. You add 2 to that, boom, 15 hits all spellcasters with 4 shield. And maybe that's just worth it. Maybe you just use 2 perks points to make the caster use shield. You move on to another target, and now your spellcasters can cast spells and they can't get counterspelled. Maybe that's just good enough, and you got that off of a nat 1. You nat 1 on your dice, and you still force the enemy caster to cast shield. Now they can't counterspell the firewall that's about to come at them for 36, versus they shielded your attack that was probably going to do like maybe 20 or 15 on average. It's just really good. It's so good. It's probably a really good. I would be hard pressed to say it's the best damage ability in the game, because again, Shock is still really good because it's able to output DPS and still have crowd control, but it's definitely up there. We have some new additions. We have phase shift. You can basically lets you skip between 2 points. This ability needs to be worked on a bit more. I don't really get the appeal of it in its current state. Again, I'm trying to rush through this, so I'm not going to read everything in detail. If you want more detail for a lot of the things, then they will get their own separate videos. If they don't get their own separate videos, then the ability sucks, and it doesn't matter what I say about it because I can't save it or save its original. But basically, phase shift allows you to pivot around a little, which is okay. It's worse than just, well, it's not worse than moving, which is why it's not an F tier ability, but it's not, it doesn't do anything for you other than let you move around a little, you know, and that's all right. It's not good, but it doesn't hurt you. Next we have shapeshifter. Basically, so morph is polymorph. Original possession. At a defeating creature, you claim one of its body parts. First challenge rating creature costs an hour and 5 gold. If the process is done, gain access to the creature's soul as a free action. You use one of the souls. So basically, you can turn into a creature. You know, you gain access to it, so you turn into a creature that you've defeated. Honestly, this ability could have just said polymorph and would be really good. But now they also have possession, which is a nice little utility on top of it. I still think that's just good enough for it to be probably A tier, because polymorph is pretty powerful. It's a 4th level spell, and for you to be getting polymorph for free, that's pretty good. Also, let me move this so I stop opening it on accident. Goliath got hotfixed a while ago so that you know, you can't chain infinite. Yeah, that's okay. Goliath should still be a pretty premier ability. Is Goliath not here? Oh, Goliath was in Goliath tier. No, yeah, that makes sense. But now it's pretty strong. Any ability that says double your health, probably pretty good. But it not only doubles your health, makes you do more damage, and it gives you a taunt to make your health actually reasonable, so that people don't just walk around you. It's still S tier. That ability is still broken. It's not legitimately broken where it breaks encounters and that your opponent can't play the game, but it's still really good. And that's it for this patch. So now we have patch 2.2. 2.2 will go into a lot more detail, because this is like what seems to be like a durability rework where things are doing a little too much damage. So it looks like the devs wanted to bring down damage, but they brought down damage, but they didn't bring down durability at all. So we'll go over that. So we have focus. You know, focus was already a middle of the pack ability, because it's just like, you know, is it really better than these other abilities? Probably not. But now it requires an action for you to activate it. This ability sucks. Now on your first turn, unless you are a sorcerer, it's dead. If you are any other spellcaster that's not a sorcerer with quicken spell, then you use your action to activate focus and you end your turn. It's literally better for you to just cast 2 spells than to use this to maybe make your spells do a little better. Because think about it like this. You can cast Fireball twice, and let's say you cast Fireball twice and they pass both times. That's better than casting Fireball once and they're probably going to fail, versus they could have already failed if you didn't activate focus. No, it doesn't actively hurt you. The longer the combat goes, you may get more value out of this ability, but in its current state, it's not good enough to warrant it ever being used. So it's going to drop down to C tier. Barrier. Changes to barrier are now they gain the aura protects. You have to use an action to activate it. Honestly, while this has the same effect of focus where you have to use your action and you're probably done for the round, using your action to give creatures plus 2, plus 3 AC maybe +4, +5 AC. +5 AC to 5 people, that's effectively +25 AC. That's, I'd spend an action on that. It does make it so that barrier is not insane, and debatably it makes barrier pretty boring because you're not allowed to use other things in your actions. It makes it really, really slow, but it's still a powerful ability. It's so powerful, and with what I know in the rest of the patch, I actually don't think it drops out of A tier with this effect. Even though focus falls out of the ability because it doesn't augment your teammates in any way, which is pretty bad. Gusto. So this is the change for their ability. What happens across the board is that all of the little damaging effects, they get knocked down to a D4. Yeah, no, that's really bad. So just to put out for reference, there'll probably be a video just dedicated to why it's wrong to decrease damage without decreasing their ability. On Gusto, you're doing an average of 2.5 damage. Let's say 2 to make the number reasonable, right? You do extra 2 damage on hit. So let's say you do 2 attacks a turn. You do an extra, let's say you do an extra 5 damage a turn. Not bad. Not bad at all. I'm sorry. Let's say you're going against a Goliath user. They get double their HP. If you're using Goliath, you have at least a D10 hit dice, so your HP is gonna go from like 80 to 160. You're gonna need about what is that, like 14 turns to just do damage to do enough damage to get rid of the ability part 1/3 of the ability of another person. And that's not unique to Gusto. That's unique to all of these damage amp abilities. And the thing that makes it even worse is that now these abilities don't scale either, because they go from 5 to 10 versus other abilities. They do a lot more crazy things, like barrier. It doubles the AC that you're giving out. Gusto users are not hitting teams with barrier. And before is just like, this doesn't change anything, right? You still probably weren't hitting them, but in those cases where you got like a lucky crit on a barrier user, like you could do some massive damage to them. That's not real anymore. You're doing an average of 5 damage on a crit, 7.5 damage on a crit turn, because you're not gonna crit both of your attacks on a turn because you can't have Gusto and perks. That's very, very terrible. And then what you want to rely on is getting the additional force damage from an extra source. That's probably fine. Getting the extra damage die. So Gusto users probably only can use Eldritch Blast now, which is again boring, because before you could do it with other things because the damage would be like on a similar level. Something I'd prefer is just to remove doing an extra damage die and having the damage drop to like a D6. Well, maybe a D6 or a D8. That way, Gusto users don't only have to use Eldritch Blast in order to keep up. Because now, for Eldritch Blast before, let's say, at power 4, because again, all of these videos, they have to be done at power 4 in order to make everything fair. You do Eldritch Blast, which would be 1d10 base, and then it becomes 2d10 due to the extra damage, and then it's 3d10 due to the base ability of Gusto. Now what's happening is that if you're Eldritch Blasting, you get the 1d10 base, 2d10 with the extra damage die, and then a d4 on top of it. The d4 being pretty negligible. If you're doing anything else, you lose that extra damage die, and if you lose that extra damage die, you lose 2 attacks worth of Gusto. Yeah, you have to only be doing force damage to use Gusto. it's really bad. And then being immune to fall damage is like negligible, which is the main reason why we press on the extra damage die, because that's the only thing left in the ability. So Gusto went from a pretty respectable deals damage to no, this ability's just not viable anymore. There's just no reason, unless you're specifically using Eldritch Blast to do so. And that's really unfortunate. The reason why it's Eldritch Blast and not other force spells is because on other force spells, they do multiple damage dice. For example, I think the spell's called like Force Spell or something, where it does a bunch of d6s. So you adding a d6 to that is pointless. You know, it doesn't even make up for the damage that you've lost by just using regular. It's really bad. And this is the same for all of these other abilities. Hydro has the same exact problem, except for the fact that for Hydro it's a little worse because it's actually kind of harder to get cold damage consistently through actual good spells that you're going to want to be using. Inferno's okay. Inferno doesn't actually get hit as hard as anything else gets hit. Going from a D6 to a D4 sucks, but you're still getting your scorching rays. The main reason why Inferno is so strong is because you get that scorching ray interaction where you're doing an additional 3d6 over the course of a scorching ray. But now instead of doing 3d6 per ray, you get 1d6 and 2d4. Not the biggest deal in the world, you know. That's fine. No big deal, you know. And still having resistance to fire damage, still a really good thing. And being weak to cold damage is negligible because, again, cold damage is pretty hard to come across. So Inferno is still going to stay what is it, B tier right now? Yeah, it's in B tier right now. It's going to stay in B tier. It's not too big of a change. Judgment also, it says it turns from 2d6 radiant to 1d4, even though it did a d10. It goes from a d10 to a d4. Yeah, again, being blinded, not a big deal. It just gives you, like, for example, if you're fighting with teammates, it just gives you disadvantage on attack rolls. If you can technically still flank with Judgment, and there are a lot of ways to give disadvantage, so it's not insane. Not to mention it's also a Constitution saving throw, so it's just an overall damage nerf. And the thing about Judgment was the fact that you would hit someone, you'd blind them, and now you get advantage on your attacks to hit them more. But because you're just losing, just to put it in perspective, right, you went from an average of 6 to an average of 2.5, meaning that you need about 3 procs of Judgment to catch up to what Judgment was used to doing. It got nerfed divided by 3. It might actually just be enough to also just knock it down to a D tier, even though before it was better because it's the same thing, but it's still Constitution safe thing. The damage nerf, the damage was actually helping Judgment stay above these other abilities because of how its damage actually interacted with other things that it did. So it's just not great. Lucky Bag, taking a little break from the damage abilities. So Lucky Bag is really complicated thing to think about even before we look at the change, because if you think about it, Lucky Bag takes a monstrous hit in this patch because it's a major damage nerfs, and then as you'll see later, Surge also gets changed. I feel like we should have already hit Surge. No, but we'll hit Surge in a second. Surge also gets changed to the point where if you want to look for S tier abilities, they're in those they're S tier in like stacking abilities. Those stacking abilities are really prominent. Persisting abilities are really prominent. Lucky Bag hates both of those styles abilities. They just can't utilize them properly. They're like okay sometimes. Like maybe it's fine to throw out a consume, you know. But the second it comes to the side of your turn, their abilities get unlocked. They don't have disadvantage anymore. it's not super good, and especially because compared to these other abilities, Lucky Bag still requires you to use a bonus action for you to go through these abilities, where it'll always be worse than sustain. Lucky Bag can't sustain abilities because they will always be worse. That's why it's very good for you to be using abilities that have instant payoff. Those don't exist anymore. Not well, at least. You need to actually have a lot of setup for a lot of the modern abilities, and that hurts Lucky Bag a lot. You don't really have a lot of quote unquote good options to pick from now. Like, Puppet Master is actually, even though it's still one of the best abilities in the game, was always a bad pull in Lucky Bag because you'd animate things, you get a turn to swing them, and they go away the next turn. And now you need to use your bonus action to try to find something else. It's just really unreliable. So all of the things that Lucky Bag was able to do well before, which made it an S tier ability, can't really do anymore because of these changes. You're not hitting surges anymore, because as you'll see, Surge took a massive hit this patch. All of the other abilities aren't super good because, again, Shock is another thing where, depending on ruling, where you'll get Shock, you'll stun something, but then by the time it comes to the start of your next turn, Shock usually lasts until, where's Shock? Shock says a creature stunned until the end of their next turn. Okay, so it doesn't really matter with Lucky Bag. They'll still be stunned for the full duration, but you're only going to stun one target reasonably, right? And bonus action, chance to stun one target with negligible damage is fine. It's not good. That's like Droplet, where Droplet gives you, just a little bit of something. Let's look at Droplet, which is not here. I bet Droplet is here. Yeah, so what Droplet does, it lets you get a spell slot, gain a bonus action. Yeah, so Droplet lets you gain a bonus action, and Lucky Bag makes you lose a bonus action in order to try to keep on pace with other things. So this is before even looking at the changes to Lucky Bag, so it's not looking good for Lucky Bag. It's probably gonna drop a minimum of a tier, just because all of the good Lucky Bag hits have been nerfed. But then there's still good things like maybe you're about to die, boom, you roll into a really lucky Phantasmal Killer, and now you get all of that ability's value without having to have it the full time. But that's unrealistic because now you have to assume when you're gonna take lethal, and then you may have to hold that ability. So now you are just as bad as someone who has that ability, has Phantasmal Killer. So not super good. But let's look at the changes to Lucky Bag. So instead, what happens to Lucky Bag is that it powers at power 5, powers up all abilities, and if it's second to last level, do not power up. So if it's like the final power threshold for ability, if it's at its second to last, if it's the last power threshold, so abilities that are like, I think it's power 11, power 20, you only get the power 11, you only get the power 20 version, they just level up slower, which is a choice because it doesn't really matter. No, it matters a lot because now you don't get power 11 thresholds until power 15. That's really, really, really bad because everything you want to hit for power 4 turns on at power 5, and power 4s are not that good. And then things that power on 8 turn on at 10, which are, again, if they're leveling up so often, they're not super good. Things are powering up at 11, which you would usually get, I can't remember if it was at 11 or 12, you get at 15, which may not ever happen. So you can't reasonably power up any abilities that has a power threshold of above 4. So now before it's just like you were a little worse. Like if it was an S tier ability, you were a little worse at using it, but the fact that you had options to pick things around made it pretty good. No, you just only have the access to base forms of abilities. That's really, really bad. That is really, 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 really bad. It's not droplet bad, right? Because you can still hit some decent abilities out there. It's like getting a turn of polymorph is fine. Usually you benefit more out of that because you get to use your actions to do a bunch of things, and they have to wear down your entire HP. It doesn't work like that for Loki Bag. You get a turn, and then you got to use your bonus action to try to get something else. Not really ideal. It's just really bad. This is why, interacting with Loki Bag is such a difficult thing, and you can't double nerf abilities at the same time, because that's really detrimental to them, because it makes it so that you're not sure which one is actually making this ability less effective, right? Because now when we're going to testing, you're not sure if it's because Lucky Bag is less effective because now they don't get an enhanced version of certain powers. You don't know if they're less effective because the other abilities around them are just not as good for them to use. You don't know if it's because it requires them to use their bonus action on every turn. You just don't know. But I think Lucky Bag has been suitably nerfed, back down to B tier where it was before. Maybe when the patches get a little more balanced, we can fit things back to where they belong. Here we have Mind Break. Same thing but before. The only thing with Mind Break that's different is that, again, it's those things where if you weren't relying too heavily on the damage, like Shock wasn't relying too heavily on damage, like it was really, really helpful, but it wasn't an insane reliance. Like maybe Shock drops down to A, maybe, but Mind Break is another one of those things. It's just like, yeah, you lose a lot of damage. You lose 3 times the damage, so it probably does drop you down into B tier, but the secondary effect is still pretty okay. It's nothing like Gust or Hydro, where I think it's probably on par with Inferno. It doesn't have as insane interactions like Inferno does, which probably makes Inferno just better than Mind Break still, but it's okay. Plague's one of those abilities where same thing as all the others, except again doesn't have the good interactions like Inferno does. Doesn't even have a good interaction like Gusto does. It's just worse, unfortunately, which is why Plague is gonna have to get dropped, probably down to where everyone else is, back in D tier. It's just not reliable. It's just not very good. We already went over, well, we didn't fully go over Shock yet, but Shock also lost damage. Before, Shock made it so that, you couldn't chain stun people. Now with the losing of damage, that's a little much to push it over the edge to put it in A tier. Still a good ability, still a good thing. If you have Shock, you're still not mad at yourself. You still get to stun someone for a turn. But if you're stunning someone who has a defensive ability, good luck, because if you're going against defensive abilities are going to be king in this patch, and I'll go over that in a second when I go over all the other nerfs. Surge. Now instead of Surge going infinite, you only get to go up to your proficiency bonus. That's the change that I believe Surge really needed, because its high highs were really high and its low lows were really low. Well, they weren't really low. They gave you a pseudo guarantee that you had an attack because it gave you an extra. Let's just say the standard I've used this plus A, we use another +8 to hit, so it's +16 to hit on the dice. Unless you nat one, you're probably hitting your target. Unless they have barrier, then it gets a little iffy, but you're probably hitting them. It's fair to say that you're probably hitting your target. But now, statistically speaking, you never want to go past that, because the recoil goes from 5% to 25%. And power 4, instead of it being the second, so it gives you it basically gives you a +1 attack. So it's worse. So let's say worst case scenario, this would be equal to Quickster. It'd be Quickster level, where Quickster gives you 2 attacks in exchange for your bonus action, and here you'd get 1 attack, 1 attack and 1 pseudo guarantee to hit for no cost practically, which is good. Slightly better than Quickster, except Quickster also has a secondary effect which would keep them on pace, if not put Quickster a little above it. But if you choose to utilize the extra attack feature of your ability, and again we have to take them as base for these analysis, you are going to kill yourself without being able to output enough DPS to justify it ever. That's not an exaggeration. If you are a surge user with let's say the best weapon, 2d6 weapon, let's say you have benefited that we have +5 strength. So the average on a d6 is 3.5, so that's 7, let's say +5, that's 12. If you have more than 48 hit points, which you probably do, you will do more damage to yourself than to your enemy. As an ability, your ability, which is your bonus, makes you go neutral. Guaranteed. That's horrid. That's worse than Voidcaller hitting your teammates. You know why? Because at least that could also hit enemies. Surge just hits you. It's bad. It's probably the worst ability we've ever seen. I think Scout just taking your reaction was probably better. Unfortunate that something like this slipped through the cracks, but we're gonna have our first F tier in a while. It's just unfortunate. Wither, again, same thing as before, except here's a kicker. Creatures, the upside is creatures can't heal, which is not any better than Gusto or anything taking no fall damage. Creatures can't heal. The healing is not very efficient in D&D. Healing abilities are few and far in between. But you also deal necrotic damage on spells and attacks. Necrotic is one of the most resisted damage types because it's resisted by fiends and undead. But on top of that, there are not a lot of abilities where you can utilize the do more damage on spell attacks with. And the only reason why Wither can't go into F tier is because it's not a detriment to use. So by default, it has to go into D tier due to how the tiers work. But if there was an E tier, Wither would go there. Now we have Dreadnought. Dreadnought makes it so that all attacks hit you. The changes all attacks hit you. Attacks that hit you deal 1/4 of damage. You get 1 AC permanently, and a starter combo technically equal to your starting AC times your proficiency bonus. So let's think about this practically. Let's say you just farm, right? Because it doesn't say every time you're hit above your AC. It just says every time you get hit and all attacks hit you. You have infinite AC. You have infinite AC. If you have infinite AC, you you have infinite temporary hit points. That's not an exaggeration. If all attacks hit you, and every time you're hit, you gain AC permanently. This is not for the combat, nothing. You permanently gain this AC. And started combat, you gain 10 HP equal to your. This is infinite stats. There's no other way to interpret it other than this is literally infinite stats. You cannot die with Dreadnought. You literally have infinite AC, infinite temp hit points, and you take 1/4 damage onto your infinite hit point pool. No. And let's give it like a hypothetical. Let's say all of these were removed and all it did was give you AC at the start of combat. AC, they give you 10 hit points equal to your AC times your proficiency bonus. Your base AC is 20. And that's before anything that can increase your AC. So let's just say 20. 20 times 2. 20 times 3. 60, 40 health. The new damage abilities do an average of 5 a round, assuming that you hit all damage. Technically speaking, how do you calculate DPR is you have to take average damage times the chance to hit. Your ability to hit is actually like 65%. So it's not anywhere near it's actually closer to like 3 damage a round. 3 damage a round compared to you're always getting this HP. Attacks are volatile. You will always get these health points. It takes you 2 minutes of just striking a Dreadnought user, assuming that, again, we're assuming that these set of conditions don't exist. It takes you about 2 minutes for your ability to cancel out the temporary hit point version of their ability. Goliath. You thought you were hot fixed out of the game. No. Your name is now Dreadnought. Congratulations. I hope you enjoy your stay at did I even spell that right? Yeah. I hope you enjoy your stay at super S tier broken unkillable. You'll probably get hot fixed. When Dreadnought get hot fixed, it'll still be S tier. You just can't chew through this much health reasonably. It's just not gonna happen. Reflect. Now reflects all the damage you take as a reaction. Wow. Reflect is magically better than shield. And because you reflect half the damage and you take only half the damage. This is now better than shield sometimes. If you use reflect really well. It's not better than these abilities. No, it's not good enough to knock it out of C tier maybe. But it's like really high C tier. Actually, reflect might actually outpace other abilities for damage. Maybe. Except, the thing why, even though it outpaces Mind Break for damage, and it has a defensive utility, but Mind Break can still give a little more damage because it's a swing and lets you make your opponent lose a turn by attacking someone else, which is good. I really want... You know what? No, I'll leave... Just know it's really close. Reflect could easily be B. Easily. Very easily. I'm going to leave it at C for now. And then we got some reworks. Scout now gives you knowledge of anything power-related creature might be using. Knowledge is king. And that's all my analysis that I need for this ability. Knowledge is king. You gain knowledge. knowledge is king. That's it. Nothing further, Your Honor. And let's go to the new artifact ability, Equalizer. So what Equalizer does is it allows you to I'll give you real easy TLDR because its artifact ability has literal essays. It lets you take a piece of land, move it somewhere else. Really good. It lets you, it lets you copy something and make duplicates, and make duplicates of people, make duplicates of mundane items. You make duplicates. Also really good. Delete, you remove something from existence. If you do so, you get a -1 to attack rolls. Not super good because of an interaction I'll describe to you real briefly in a second. Then edit, which allows you to change the properties of an item by sacrificing something of equivalent exchange. Also really good. It lets you Batman it up. It lets you be really powerful in preparation. Downside for this ability being really powerful in preparation, it allows you to be really powerful in preparation. It lets you have massive terrain control on the battlefield. But it also just lets you turn your opponent's equipment into dust with edit. You change physical and magical properties of an item. You just touch dirt and you touch a sword and you change its properties to dirt. You lose the sword. And now you got some magical dirt. You can't wield dirt. It's just delete. It is literally just delete. Except you don't get the downside. Not to mention, if you want to copy and paste yourself, your copy can delete for no downside if you really wanted to. There's just so many combos, and then there's inspect. You literally never take you never take it because it's the worst one by far, and you're only allowed to take 2 at the start of the day anymore. Maybe if it was you get 2 plus inspect, that would be pretty good, but inspect literally never matches up to anything else, and delete usually doesn't match up with anything else unless you have copy pasta. At the end of the day, Equalizer is an equalizer. This ability is busted. It is the best out of combat ability. Maybe Phantom World gives you a run for your money, but you can't move during Phantom World. So it's also really powerful in combat. It's just all around insane. It's really, 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 really good. Equalizer is probably the best ability in the game right now. It's just that good. It's just that good. Clone. Start of combat, you create 3 clones of yourself. With default, they have +0. Clones have all aspects you can, including hit points. Clones share your initiative. They can only take actions and reactions. That means they can't benefit from movement. Interesting. Yeah, clones can't benefit from movement. You can sacrifice when your clones are... Oh! You can sacrifice one of your clones because No, the clone is just a full heal 3 times. And again, because I have to make this comparison every time, if you're hitting a clone user as any of the abilities that just got nerfed, it's going to take you about a minute to do 1 clone's worth of damage. Yeah. See, the thing that makes the clone worse than like Goliath, well, there are a lot of reasons why it's worse than Goliath, but other spells that give you like more hit points and stuff is the fact that if your opponents are smart, they're able to also they hit a lot of AoE because the clones, they can't benefit from movement, so they are very susceptible to taking AoE along with you, lowering your pool of health. Basically, fireballs, they go from doing maybe 30 damage to 120. That's pretty good. But clone, it's good. It's just good. It's a good ability. It's A tier. It's just pretty good. A tier is a little stuffed. Maybe I might want to move some of these around. It's pretty good. I talked about Surge and I didn't remove it from here. So let's cut this. Yeah. Is there anything else that I need? Fusion. Basically, without going through all of Fusion is a real headache of an ability. Basically, you take 3 creatures, you turn them into 1 creature. The downside is there's not a lot of benefit to doing that. You turn into 1 big creature, and now you're just 1 big target. If you get CC'd, like if you get stunned, not stunned because you're immune to stuns, but you're not immune to paralysis. You're not immune to blind. You're not immune to poison. All of these status conditions have 3 times the effect on you because they all just affect 1 creature. There's a world where there are a lot of abilities that maybe combine to make this work, but you only have the access to the 2 creatures that are not using well, obviously, right? But like you have to sit down and think. You're just like, would I rather just have any other ability? You know, would I rather just be that extra body? You know, would I rather just have that extra utility on the field to be at multiple places at once? Because if you're 1 body, you can probably get kited around, you know? Like if you, like it doesn't talk about how does movement work? Well, the combination of these features. So you'll still have flight speed. If you're able to combine with someone, you'll have the ability to fly. But you're not necessarily a lot stronger, and there aren't a lot of really broken ability, like there are broken ability combinations when used by 2 separate people, where separate people are able to utilize it, but like usually support units don't want to support themselves even if they had an extra ability. Because think about it, all Fusion does is practically gives you it gives you an ability weapon. TLDR. You can already do that without having your base ability be that. All in all, it's usually more harmful than it is helpful. Not to mention when the Fusion breaks, it's not like you go back and everyone has taken a decent amount of damage. I'm pretty sure the Fusion user gets knocked unconscious. It's not ever usable, unfortunately. Mainly because of how crowd control works, where now they just need 1 creature to fail a save, and it's much easier to dedicate resources to making 1 creature fail a save than trying to get 3 creatures to fail a save. You know, it's just spellcasters just have a field day with Fusion. Every dog has its day. Fusion will get there. Very little changes probably need to be done to make Fusion viable. Probably just need to make it immune to more forms of crowd control. And, you know, maybe you just make it so that when you pop out of the Fusion, the only person who takes any reasonable type of damage is the person who did Fusion. Like, because if all this ability is like, it lets the team, like, they get some few turns of setup, then that's bad, but it's not F tier. Like, because if a team doesn't have setup, then you had a lot of turns of free hit points. Again, come back to this idea of free hit points, and damaging abilities just can't keep up. because damaging abilities were balanced around the fact that other abilities had these. They were able to gain a lot of hit points, and it's hard for them to keep up. But the issue was that I guess the other damage abilities scaled a little too easily, so they were able to do it in like 3 rounds. They were able to knock down the 10 hit points, and then they were still able to be effective after that. Now it takes them 10, 9 or 10, if you're lucky. It's bad. Tangle. It lets you grapple people. It lets you grapple a person. Okay. Now, if Tangled lets you restrain a creature, this would be a good ability. But it's a grapple. Technically, you can grapple to multiple creatures at 24 range. It's DC 10. It's DC 10. Come on. You're not failing a DC 10. But if you dedicate multiple tentacles, you're reasonably grappling 2 creatures. And then as you power up, maybe you're reasonably grappling more creatures. You're removing their movement. That's pretty good control. Base, it's alright. Reducing a target HP to 0 is alright. It's okay. And we went over time skip. Now let's take a glance at all the abilities. Let's see who actually wins from all these abilities doing less damage. Perks will consistently do more damage because it makes you consistently hit more often. And because you're consistently hitting more often, just think about it like this. If you have an average of 65% chance to hit, and perks makes it so that, let's say you always hit, then you gain 35% DPS with the ability to make your attacks crit, which will double your, I say DPS, it's DPR, just damage per round, which crits literally double your DPR. So that's practically times, let's say, 2.2 for being a perks user. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So you're always hitting, then you're getting some crits, and then it's not. And then if people hit you, then it lets you just continue this cycle for longer and longer. Really good. Consume. You get some hit points. It's harder to hit through your hit points, because when you think about it, right? How are you chewing through 15 extra damage a turn? How are you doing it? When you hit a creature, on average, these damage, now that you don't have these damage abilities, because the damage abilities are practically pseudo removed from the game, like bonus 5. You're getting these bonus 5 damages on a turn. Consume is giving you like a lot of effective health. Even if it's not literal health, it's giving you effective health because it's giving you disadvantage on stuff. Dreadnought is giving you literal health. Clone is giving you literal health. Goliath is giving you literal health. All these things are giving you literal health. Reflect is giving you practical health. Sacrificial Healer is giving you literal health. Which technically with the nerf to damn Sacrificial Healer may reasonably be able to jump up the tier list. But it's really just not good at all, these changes. If you wanted to do these changes, you needed to bring down durability. You can't just nerf damage when damage wasn't king, it's just not a thing. That's it. That's the review. Justice for Surge. Oh, I forgot to do the new additions. Stone Skin is more effective health. Good luck killing them. Omega Law. A tier. Prediction. It gives you bonus action economy. You can gamble in action and make something. Bro, I'll hit all 3 missiles of magic missile. Magic missile always hit. You just get a free action every turn. Like, come on. Free action is pretty powerful. And technically speaking, you can just infinitely predict. Let's say you predict that you'll hit magic missile. You hit that, and then you predict again, because there's not a once per turn clause on this. So you just infinitely chain magic missiles. Infinitely. That's not an exaggeration. You literally, or your prediction is that they'll take damage from fireball. Creatures always take damage from fireball unless they have evasion. You chain infinite fireballs. The only thing this doesn't work on is things with attack rolls, because it doesn't work on things with saving throws. Yeah. Things that let you go infinite are pretty strong. And that's all I gotta say about that. This patch is really, really not good. The reason why this patch is really, really bad is because we have 2 abilities that are just fundamentally broken. A lot of the top abilities are things that let you sustain, with, Puppet Master actually being the only ability that's allowed to keep up in DPS, because you're able to manipulate so many targets at once. Other than that, it's just hard to keep up with the tank stats that are provided. And Mantra and Amplifier are actually, their ability to make you guaranteed hit things are worth more than you getting that extra 1d4, that extra 2d4. And not to mention that we actually have F tier abilities again. We have super S tier abilities, and now we have F tier abilities again. Along with D tier being a little more heavily populated. Riot, fix your game.